What is up, you guys? Diggerdan here, coming at you with another book review. This time reviewing Teckla, written by Steven Brust. Now this is the third installment in the Vlad Taltos series. I have done reviews on the first two books, if you want to go watch those. But yeah, without further ado, let's dig into Teckla. Now, if you have watched my first two reviews on those first two books, then you know I like those first two books immensely. Both rated over 8. I think the first one was like almost 8.5, and the second one was even higher than that. And now Teckla, it is still a good book. I do still dig it, and I do still highly recommend it. But I think this is where it takes a dip in quality a little bit, at least in my opinion. And mostly, I think that just falls in that I didn't really care for the plot in this third one, in Teckla, as much as I did in Jhereg and in Yendi. Because those first two books help establish the world and help establish Vlad as a character. And now in Teckla, it still fleshes out Vlad a little bit more as a character, but it relies much more heavily on the support cast, I guess you could say. It follows Kati, Vlad's wife, much closer than the first two books, or even especially the second book, especially the first book, because she wasn't even in the first book, I don't believe. And then it introduced more Easterners, more humans, that basically the plot is that Easterners are meeting up with Teckla, who are like the lowest on the caste system, basically, for all the elves. They're basically the slaves and all the servants, and basically doing all like the nastiest, dirtiest, most labor-intensive jobs that the rest of the elves just refuse to do. So yeah, the Teckla and the Easterners, they kind of join forces and are starting to kind of chip away at authority of the Empire, pretty much. That's kind of where the stage is set, and then Vlad kind of gets thrown into it because Kati gets involved, and just kind of his reaction and just kind of the events that happen because of his reaction and her reaction to his so the events of that, and kind of how everything shakes out. So without saying too much or spoiling too much, yeah, and I didn't like it as much. Like, it still is a good story. Again, I'm glad I read it. It was still entertaining, but I was just a little disappointed because I just liked the first two so much. But with that being said, my overall score for Teckla was 7.05. Now, if you don't understand how I got that score, if you haven't watched any of my previous videos, I rate my book, or the books I read, on 5 categories, and then take an average based off those ratings for those specific categories. So yeah, if you don't want any spoilers for Teckla, I would recommend clicking off now, because I'm going to start getting the spoilers here. So bye to all those, and everybody else, let's keep digging in. So the first category I rate is emotional impact, and I rated emotional impact on Teckla as a 7, which is a dip from the first two books. The first two, I think, were over 8. And again, it was just because I didn't connect with some of these characters as much, and I didn't really connect with the plot as much. Like Kelly, kind of like the main head honcho for all these Easterners, and kind of like the main propagandist, I guess I would say, writing these letters or these papers that they sell to Easterners in Teckla, and even just really anybody that happens to be in that part of the town. But it's kind of like the slums, where it's like only Easterners in Teckla that happen to be there. So it's, yeah, kind of just selling within their own people. So yeah, I didn't really care for him. He's a revolutionist, is how he describes himself, and he's just very long-winded. So whenever Kelly is on the page and I am reading Kelly, it's like whenever he has a response or is telling Vlad something, it's like the entire page or at least half the page. And it's just a lot of words. And in my opinion, it just kind of falls flat a lot of times. But the reason it's still high as a 7 for emotional impact is just because the way, like, Vlad is still in danger a lot of times, because he did some things to try to help get Kati out of the rebellion, and it put him directly in the crosshairs of a fellow Jhereg crime boss. Yeah, another crime boss who has special interests, let's say, in that part, in the southern part of town, where these slums are. Basically, he just has his different crime things going on. Like he's got gambling, and he's got like prostitution and like those types of things going on in that part of town. So when Vlad kind of comes in and tries to push those people out to try to cause a reaction from that fellow crime boss, but pins it onto Kelly, and tries to get Kelly assassinated, and hopefully like this will all go away. Eventually that target is on Vlad's back instead of Kelly's, and then so Kelly just trying, or not Kelly, excuse me, and then Vlad trying to work through that, but also trying to get Kati out of the rebellion to save her life, make sure she's safe, so they can get on with their lives. Like that, it's still high emotion. Like anything could happen with Vlad. But something that's kind of like I'm on the fence about is his relationship with Kati. Like they're married, they seemed happily married up until the start of this book, when she didn't tell Vlad that she joined the rebellion, and then he had to like tail her one day, and that's how he found out, pretty much. And like she, or actually, it's not. He did that actually after he found out he was involved, because one of the rebellion guys came to their door, knocked, and told Kati that one of their fellow revolutionists was assassinated. That's what happened. That's right. And then she told Vlad, and he was upset. And then that's when he decided to tail her, or follow her. And that's what when he met Kelly and the rest of the revolutionists. Yeah, and then he was very upset by her not telling him, which I think is fair, because I feel like if my wife did that, had like a secret second life, I would be kind of flabbergasted. I'd be a little upset, especially if it's something as dangerous as like revolution against the existing government, who has very much high military might, and all those types of things. So, yeah, so it's still... Emotional impact, like I said, is still a 7, but some of the things just kind of seesawed back and forth for me, whether I liked it or I didn't like it. Next, at characters, I rated also a 7. Similar thing with the previous books, where it's like a lot of the cast is awesome, and you already have a relationship with them, like Vlad and Kati, and Loish, and Razka, or the other Loish's mate, I forget how to say her name. And like all of Vlad's like underlings, like Styx, and again I forget his second-hand guy, but like those guys are cool. It's awesome. But then again, Kelly and kind of some of the other revolutionists are really boring and stale in my opinion, and just really kind of bring that down a little bit. Like before, I think characters were like 8 and 9. Yeah, I had rated characters 9 on the previous 2 installments, and then yeah. Again, they're still solid overall. Like, they were still interesting to read. But, like, mostly, again, Kelly just kind of took that down for me. Next is plot. This, I rated a 6. This, again, was the weakest thing, in my opinion. It is interesting a little bit, just to see how Vlad reacts, since he himself is an Easterner. To see other Easterners team up with Teckla to try to start a revolution. But it felt a little forced, having his wife basically kind of turn, in my opinion, a little bit, like kind of on a dime, and like, this is what she's doing with her life now, and then not to tell Vlad about it. And I will agree that Vlad kind of overreacts in a couple of things, but I feel like it's justified, because he's just doing what he knows best. But also some of this plot is kind of forcing Vlad's self-reflection. Like, does he still want to be an assassin, even though it's really seen as kind of like the lowest of the low in the lines of like doing work, you know? Like, you kill people for money. Like, people throw that in his face like 3 or 4 times in this book. On top of him throwing it in his own face, like, because he doesn't really feel good about it. And just kind of so his emotions changing a little bit. But it's like, which means it's a different Vlad that we met and fell in love with and experienced in the first 2 books. You know, so I think some of this lower rating for me is digesting some of that as well. because I don't know if I like this new Vlad as much as the old Vlad, which we've only had 2 small books with, so I think there was some of that. But again, just the plot itself, I didn't really care for. And it was basically Vlad doing things to himself in reaction to this rebellion that he's trying to snuff out before it can really get going. So yeah, that's what I have to say about the plot. Next is dialogue and prose. Again, Steven Brust does a really good job of writing small books, because this one is like just over 200 pages. This is 214 pages, but he still tells a lot of story in that amount of pages. So his word efficiency is great. But some of the monologue-y stuff from Kelly specifically, and him just kind of forcing the ideology of rebellion a little bit, like it's just very long-winded. It really brought it down for me. Because before it was like an 8 I had on the previous 2 books. So this was almost 2 points of drop. This is 6.25. I don't know if I said that yet. 6.25 for dialogue and prose on Teckla. So it's not its weakest thing. The plot's the weakest, but it's definitely one of the weakest things, in my opinion, especially compared to the previous 2 books. But again, it's still an easy to read book. Like, you still kind of know what's going on. But again, in some of those dialogue things where it's like characters are conversing back and forth, I kind of lose sometimes, like, who's actually saying what, especially when it's multiple people in the room or in the conversation. Or if it's just he said. It's like, okay, who is the he? Which one is it, Especially when it's like back and forth, and it's back and forth instead of just one long line. Like, so it's a lot of that. It's really, I guess, really what I'm trying to say is during the conversations is kind of where I get lost a little bit about what's going on, and I have to read it 2-3 times to understand who said what. But when you're in Vlad's head, and when he's kind of narrating, that's where it makes the most sense, because it's very easily spelled out, and that's where I didn't get lost. It was really the dialogue in the conversation sometimes. And then finally, the world building, that was a 9, same as the first 2 books. Again, I love the efficiency of words and how much world building you can pack into this with only 214 pages. Again, it kind of benefits with the established lore in world building in the first 2 books, which helps a lot. But again, I think that's where it draws maybe back on the plot, because it wasn't doing as much world building and more focusing on these secondary, tertiary characters that I personally didn't connect with and didn't really care for, even though you're supposed to. So, but yeah, I guess again, good things I want to say. World building was awesome. Like, the magic system again is great, even though it didn't get utilized as much in this one. But even just the opposing Jhereg crime boss, interacting with Vlad, and even Kelly and Kati, and just seeing how, like, there was a scene where there was a dragon lieutenant or Phoenix Guard lieutenant interacting with that crime boss. I keep saying that crime boss because I forget what his name was. And then he tries, because there was an interaction where the Phoenix Guard got called in to that part of the town where the Easterners and the Teckla are, because the Teckla and the Easterners the revolutionists were blocking off parts of the road, their streets, and like demanding the Empress look into some of these murders or these assassinations that have gone on. And the Empress decides to send in the Phoenix Guard to try to break this up, and just have traffic continue as normal. And then Kelly and his band just aren't having it. And that's when the Phoenix Guard come in and are like face to face with Kelly. And that's when this other Jhereg crime boss comes in, and goes and talks to this Phoenix Guard lieutenant, to try to talk Kelly down and try to get rid of this conflict. But then the Phoenix Guard, finally getting into this part, when talking to this other Jhereg crime boss, cuts his face with his own blade, or cuts a crime with his own blade, and then she tells him to go talk to Kelly. So just kind of seeing even where Jhereg kind of falls on the, or clan or House Jhereg kind of falls on the hierarchy of the elves, really isn't all that high. It seems like it's still higher, obviously, than Teckla. Tekla's like the lowest of the low, like just over Easterners, or Easternlings, whatever you want to say. But yeah, still not that high. So even little tidbits like that got peppered in here, which I think raised it a little bit. So yeah, I was kind of focusing on a lot of the negative stuff, but I still enjoyed reading this book, and I'm still excited to go on to book 4. And something I haven't mentioned in either of the reviews yet is that the first 3 books, Jhereg, Yendi, and Teckla, are actually, like, I have them separately, but there's also an installment where they're all 3 in one. It's called the Book of Jhereg. So if you want to read these books and you have a hard time finding single installments, you should also look for that, where it's just the 3 in one, and that might be easier for you to find. So yeah, I still recommend this. I still dig Teckla. Again, 7.05. Nothing. That's not bad, honestly. It's 70%, right? That's still a C. C's to get degrees, right? But yeah. Anyway, if you like this video, like this review, please hit like down below. Want to see more from me, Diggerdan? Please hit that subscribe button as well as that bell notification icon, so you guys know when I upload each and every single time. And I will see you guys in the next review. Thanks for watching.